Let's start with this government shutdown. Can you explain it sort of for a fifth grader, not for a Berkeley undergrad? Because we're faced with this time and time and again, and I mean, just give us a really quick civics lesson about why this keeps happening.
Well, the civics lessons, the superficial is that the Congress and the president have to agree uh, on a spending measure to keep the government funded. And this goes back to the Constitution. I mean, Congress is the funding source for the government. But when you have two parties at loggerheads, and one party is the president's party and doesn't believe in government and really doesn't believe that we should have health care, doesn't believe that we should have the kind of freedoms we do have. The other party, if it's a minority in Congress, doesn't have much leverage, and therein lies the big story. And I
Well, in
wish.
fact, Mark Warner tweeted, I'm sure you might have seen it. He tweeted today, I'm from Virginia, so he's my senator. Republican White House, Republican Senate, Republican House of Representatives, Republican shutdown. Having said that, there are two separate narratives, as is so often the case, Bob, in our current culture and in this country. The one narrative that the Republicans are perpetrating is that this bill or that the Democrats are want to spend money on undocumented immigrants and on health care. Democrats are saying, whoa, 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 wait a minute. Obamacare premiums or the Obamacare is going to run out. Health care is going to increase. How many people? I mean, millions of people, as many as 4 million. Or sorry, how many people will be losing Medicaid? 20. I mean, healthcare prices will go up for 22 million, 4 million people over the next decade will lose health care. So we've got these two competing narratives, Bob. And it seems to me it depends on who you're listening to and what you're watching and what you're reading as to who you are to believe.
Well, Katie, it also depends on the facts, I hope. And the
Yes, I hope
facts
it
are
does too. And that's why you're here.
Okay, the facts are that if you are here in the United States illegally, if you're an undocumented worker, for example, you cannot get Medicaid. You are not eligible for Medicare. You're not eligible for the Affordable Care Act. You just simply can't get it. You don't have you don't have a Social Security number. You don't have anything that is required by government to be able to get these programs. The other fact that's really important is that the big, beautiful bill, which I call the big, ugly bill, that passed in July, cut Medicaid and cut the Affordable Care Act dramatically. Not a single Senate Democrat voted for that bill. That bill was squeezed through the Senate on an arcane process called reconciliation. And a lot of Democrats said, well, if you just got that, squeeze that through 51 to 50, with J.D. Vance casting the vote, the tie-breaking vote, that doesn't reflect our values, and it doesn't reflect the values of most Americans. And our values, and most Americans say, we don't want to cut Medicaid, and we don't want to cut the Affordable Care Act. And if you do that, if you do make those cuts, then starting next year, uh, the premiums, healthcare premiums for 24 million people will soar so high that many of those people, most of those people, will not be able to afford any health insurance at all. That's the reality, Katie. That is the reality. That's what the fight here is over a fundamental, basic issue, and that is the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid are the things that are we took for granted in terms of health care and health benefits. Are they going to be available to 24 million Americans? And I say, of course they should be. Of course they should be. And the Democrats now have a little bit of leverage, finally, and the Democrats ought to be doing exactly what they're doing, holding out, hold out. Don't agree to this, to continue the government with this horrible, big, bad, ugly bill
Well,
as part
you
of
know,
your the government that you're continuing.
But Bob, to my point about how competing narratives, someone just wrote on our conversation, they shouldn't be able to get Medicare if they're not citizens. I think people don't understand that they can't.
They can't. They cannot get it. They cannot. Can we just be clear? They can't get Social Security. They can't get Medicare. They can't get the Affordable Care Act. They may, if they are working in the United States, many of them are paying in to Medicare and all of the Medicaid, but they can't get Medicare or Medicaid out. They are ineligible, period.
Why do you think that this has so much, not with everyone, obviously, but why do you think that perpetrating this and this sort of myth of Medicaid and Medicare, Bob, is penetrating the American psyche, and that the Republicans are being quite effective at at kind of delivering at this misinformation and having it be believed?
Well, they're very effective at lying, Katie, and that's been true even before Trump. I remember the death tax. They talked about, if you raise the capital gains taxes, or if you have a large, not a large, if you have a tax that is an estate tax when you die, and even though it applies to a tiny, tiny number of Americans who are extraordinarily wealthy, they called it the death tax, and they said the death, you shouldn't penalize death. Well, they do that. They know how to do that, and I guess Democrats don't really know how to lie effectively. Democrats should not be lying effectively. I think one of the biggest kind of asymmetries between the two parties is that you have one party, the Republicans, not only lying, but also they don't believe in government and they don't believe in democracy, many of them. And you have another party with Democrats who think that it's their responsibility to tell the truth most of the time, and also to uphold the government and democracy and the Constitution. And that is a fundamental asymmetry.
You heard what Senator Mark Warner tweeted. Uh, obviously, the Affordable Care Act and not having paying skyrocketing healthcare premiums is popular with most Americans. So, do you think that the Republicans will be blamed for this shutdown, or what kind of impact will it have on how people perceive the Democratic Party?
Well, if the Democrats hold out and they make a big enough stink and they say, we are not going to buy on to letting the government continue if the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid are going to be attacked and cut by the Republicans, and they make that clear over and over and over and over again, I think there's a very good chance that Trump and the Republicans will be blamed. And the other point here is that uh, again, as you said, Katie, Trump and the Republicans own the government. They run the Senate, they run the House, they run the executive branch. For all intents and purposes, they run the Supreme Court. I mean, this is their government, and if anybody's going to be blamed, of course it should be them.
What are the real world implications, Bob, of a government shutdown? What happens in terms of uh, salaries, in terms of benefits, in terms of sort of how the government operates?
Well, I've been involved in two shutdowns. When I was Secretary of Labor, we had a very big shutdown. I can tell you it's traumatic for the government employees who are being furloughed. A lot of government employees, even those who mandatory, who have to work, are not being paid. I remember as Secretary of Labor trying to console employees who were saying to me with tears in their eyes, how am I going to pay my bills? I mean, I joined the government because I believed in what we were doing. So that's one big, big ongoing problem and issue. Also, a lot of Americans are not going to get the services and benefits that they thought they were going to receive. Uh, and whether you're talking about national parks being open or museums being open, or you're talking about, Social Security checks will still come through, but they may be delayed. And if you have a problem applying for Social Security, it may be hard for you to actually get the application through and processed. But a lot of other things we take for granted are not going to be there. And, air traffic controllers will be working, but they're not going to be paid. And a lot of people in the armed services are going to be working. They may not be paid.
That's right. A lot of military families, who may be living paycheck to paycheck won't, they'll get the amount of money after the government reopens, but it's going to be a big hardship for many people.
And remember, we've had now since 1990, we've had 8 shutdowns. 4 of them have been under Donald Trump.
Wow. We know already, Bob, that Donald Trump is not a big fan of the federal workforce, given what he did almost immediately after he came into office. Do you think he's going to use this as an excuse to just for the wholesale firing of many federal workers and getting rid of a lot of government agencies? Or is he able, can he do that?
Well, he's already been doing it, Katie. I
Well,
think
I
the
know, but I mean, can he use this as an excuse to do more of it?
Of course, he's going to use it as an excuse to do more of it. But you get to a point where there are real dangers in not having government workers protecting people, consumers from fraud, from corporate fraud. Not having government workers or agencies that are protecting the environment. One of the big problems in that big ugly bill was that you have a tremendous, a kind of almost a lot. I mean, a lot of the environmental protections that we take for granted, again, uh, ending in that big ugly bill, but even more are being cut every day by the administration. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau almost eliminated, USAID eliminated. Now, the Congress didn't do any of these things. It was done by the Trump administration, by Elon Musk and his Doge, and now by Russell Vought and his OMB. This is not what our democracy is about. Our democracy is about we want something, we need something. Congress passes money, engineers it, and so Congress makes the decisions based on the people. This is Article 1 of the Constitution. It's the people. Congress is supposed to be the people's house.
And they have obviously the power of the purse. But now I guess the Trump White House is attempting to reallocate funds that have already been allocated by Congress and that the president has signed or that it's, has gotten executive approval, if you will. And I was talking to David Frum this morning. You probably know David from The Atlantic and from your years in politics. And, he was saying that Richard Nixon tried to do this, but the Supreme Court stopped him because he basically said the Constitution doesn't say I can't do it, right? It doesn't say I can do it, but it doesn't say I can't do it. So, is it possible that this will go to the Supreme Court too?
Yes, it is. In fact, it is heading to the Supreme Court. They're called impoundments. It was, and Congress passed a law right after Nixon saying you cannot impound if you're the executive. You can't just impound funds that Congress has appropriated. It went to the Supreme Court one time shortly after it was enacted, and the Supreme Court said, yes, that is constitutional. Congress can stop that kind of impoundment. And impoundments, therefore, it's reasonable to assume that impoundments are unconstitutional. Well, it's going to go back to the Supreme Court. Will this Supreme Court uphold what the previous Supreme Court did? There's no guarantee. And the Supreme Court has been very, very willing to support Donald Trump in all sorts of ways. But we will see. I mean, Katie, it does bring up this basic question about a government shutdown. In some ways, to some extent, the government is already shut down. That is, if you define a shutdown as the executive's ability to decide not to spend any money or not to spend money on what the president doesn't like, or to shift money to what the president does like from what the president doesn't like, well, that's effectively a shutdown.
So, yeah, well, You're right. And can anything be done about that? I mean, I guess because of the Republican controlled Congress, they can't really push back on that.
No, and this is why I think that everything we're experiencing now has got to be understood in light of the upcoming midterm elections in next November. Because if, for example, uh, come January, 24 million Americans lose their health insurance because they can't possibly afford health insurance, given what has happened to the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid because of Trump and the Republicans. They are going to be, understandably, justifiably, pretty upset. And they're going to take it out on Trump and the Republicans, I assume, in the midterm elections. A lot of other Americans who don't like the fact that, for example, ICE immigration agents are coming to their neighborhoods and arresting people, some of whom are Americans who have been here and are here legally, not illegally, but are here legally.
And given
And when
absolutely zero due process, right, Bob?
well, there's no due process. I mean, due process stands for a simple proposition. You can't be arrested and put in prison without some neutral judge looking and seeing that the reasons are valid. And it's happening right now. And there's a lot of racial profiling going on. ICE agents are targeting people who look Latino. And that is against not only against the law and the Constitution, but it's against everything we believe in this country. So, for that reason, also, I believe that the midterm elections will swing toward uh, the Democrats away from Republicans, and Democrats will retake both houses of Congress.
That's your prediction. But what about this whole notion of redistricting? I talked to Tim Miller of the Bulwark, and he said he thought redistricting in all these red states would ultimately work to the Republicans' advantage. This very unusual mid decade prior to the census coming out, just because the president is asking these states to redistrict and to change, to get rid of Democratic seats. So they won't take a shellacking, as they say, in the midterm elections, that it's actually going to work in favor of the Republicans. How concerned are you about that?
Well, I'm somewhat concerned. Here in California, we are trying to fight back against particularly Texas's redistricting that provided what looks like 5 additional Republican seats. And so we in California are redistricting temporarily, just to balance things and create 5 more Democratic seats. The notion is that you want to take away any incentive on the part of red state governors and red state legislators to redistrict in ways that really distort even further our democracy.
But
Not, and this is not a race to the bottom. I think that that's an important distinction. If blue state governors and legislatures are counterbalancing what red state governors and legislatures are doing and stopping what they are doing. That is not creating a race to the bottom. That is simply preserving our democracy as it is.
Bob, doesn't that assume that there are enough blue states to counterbalance what these red states are doing? I haven't checked my latest numbers or my latest states, but states like Indiana and there are a bunch of others are redistricting as well. And I talked to Kathy Hochul. I sound like I'm such a name dropper. I'm just interviewing as many people as I can about stuff. But Kathy Hochul said New York can't do it because it's against the state constitution. So will all these blue states be able to counterbalance what all these red states are doing ultimately?
Well, they're going to try. I mean, I know people in Pennsylvania and in Massachusetts and in other blue states with blue state governors and blue state legislatures. They are going to try. But again, I want to emphasize what they're going to try to do is counterbalance
Right,
what
but are they
is
going to be able to is my question. Is Are they going to have the numbers to really to where this is going to work and it's not going to give Republicans a huge advantage in the midterms?
not going to be a huge advantage in any event, Katie. It may, at worst comes to worst, be an advantage, some little advantage to the Republicans in the midterms. But again, I think what we are seeing and we will see is a great tsunami, a great wave of independents and and obviously Democrats, but also many Republicans who say this is not the government we wanted. This is not what we bargained for when we voted in the last election. We've got to at least make sure that there is some set of counterbalances in place in Congress, some guardrails. Otherwise, we are going to lose our democracy completely.
Getting back to the shutdown, I know 89% of the EPA has been furloughed, but many of the department's employees are being told that they need to keep working on projects that are still receiving funding. What, I mean, can you tell me what this looks like in practice?
Well, in practice, it means that many people and many families, and you alluded to this a little while ago, 70% of American families are working paycheck to paycheck. Now, in the government, there's no reason to believe that government families are any different in terms of the ratio, the number of people, the percentage that are working paycheck to paycheck. You have a lot of families who are not being paid and will not be paid, and they don't know when the shutdown will be over. They are being asked to continue to work without pay. Many of them are willing to do it, and many of them fear that they will lose their jobs if they don't do that. But on the other hand, the hardship could be very, very great. If we get into 2 or 3 or 5 weeks of this, can you imagine how difficult it will be for many of these families to make ends meet?
A lot of my followers wanted to know why members of Congress are going to still get paid uh, or get a paycheck when so many other people won't.
You want? I don't think they should. I mean, I don't think members of Congress. I don't think anybody in the executive branch. I don't think the president or any of his assistants or Russell Vogt or any of them should get any paycheck during this government shutdown.
Let's talk about ICE and the impact it's having on economies. Obviously, the sort of the moral issues of ripping people away from their families without due process, the aforementioned racial profiling are reasons why people are really upset about these ICE raids, except for some people who seem to be cheering them on, but they feel uh, so menacing to say the least. Can you talk about the impact these ICE raids are having on the economy?
They are having a huge negative effect on the economy, Katie. Now, we don't know, and we don't have enough data to know exactly the effect of the ICE raids and how many people are just so frightened that they're not going to work or they are leaving the country, versus another big drag on the economy, which is the tariffs and how much each one is contributing to a very dramatic slowdown in hiring. What worries me is that the economy seems to be slipping toward recession. There is almost no hiring going on. And I mean, after all, if you're an employer and you are trying to predict the future, which you have to do if you're hiring, if you hire people, you are hiring on the basis of your predictions that you're going to need additional help in the future. Well, if you don't know what the administration is going to be doing about tariffs, and if you don't know how many people you're going to be able to keep or hire in terms of your workforce that you already have, if you don't know how many consumers in your town are going to be able to come and buy things that you are providing because they are scared, because their money is running out, because they are afraid of ICE raids, because they're losing their government jobs, whatever it is, you are not going to hire, and you are also going to be not only part of the problem, but you are going to be uh, part of an economy that is heading toward recession. And there's I don't want to get too technical about this, but we're now in between both inflation because of the prices going up, particularly food prices, and recession because of almost no jobs being created. When you have those two together, it's kind of it's kind of dreaded what's called stagflation. The problem with stagflation is that the Federal Reserve Board really doesn't know what to do. It doesn't have any tools. It can't fight inflation and recession at the same time.
I haven't talked to you in a long time, so I'm so happy to see you and touch.
Am I hearing you up, Katie?
You're not hearing me well? Can you
I'm
hear
hearing you fine. I said I'm fear that I'm not really cheering you up. These are not.
Oh, you're not cheering me up. I thought you said you weren't hearing me. I can't hear it myself. But um, I'm just curious. You've watched all of this unfold. It's only been, God, what has it been, 9 months? About a little over 9 months. And, as you've watched this administration um do all sorts of things, Bob, I'm just curious how you're I mean, what do you think of everything that's going on in this country?
Well, one thing we haven't talked about that I'm very concerned about is the targeting of political opponents, like James Comey, using the Justice Department as a weapon. This again, it runs counter to every tradition, every value we have in this country. After Richard Nixon did that, made used his enemies list and used the Justice Department as a kind of way of getting at his enemies, we put some controls in place, some rules in place, so that presidents could not do this. But Donald Trump is wrecking every norm we have. And our democracy is seriously endangered. When you have ICE agents uh, who are arresting Americans without any due process, when you have a major cuts in the federal budget that people want and need, programs like Medicaid and uh, and the Affordable Care Act, and you have on top of all of that the weaponization, the politicization of the Justice Department. You have a situation that doesn't resemble a democracy. You and I have talked for years about America, about our government. I've written, I don't know how many books that people have never read um, about the government and our democracy, but we are really in a crisis right now of democracy, a crisis that is not just a government shutdown crisis. It's so much deeper and broader than that.
Well, let me ask you about the get just gosh, there's so much I want to talk to you about. I'm talking to Charlie Sykes about what happened in Quantico, Virginia yesterday, which was so bizarre. As somebody who's covered the Pentagon early in my career, what's happening there is so surreal and so bizarre. Um, well, let me just ask you real quickly what you thought of that.
I thought it was surreal and bizarre are two adjectives that I definitely would use. But in addition, when the president of the United States talks to the top 800 or 850 military commanders in one place and says to them, I'm going to ask many of you to go into American cities and counter the enemy within. The enemy within. What is the enemy within? Who are the enemies within? He's talking about Americans who he disagrees with into cities that are traditionally Democratic cities or have Democratic mayors. That also is a move toward an authoritarian regime. It's a move against democracy. It could be intended in the midterm elections. We were talking about the midterms a moment ago to intimidate people from in democratic cities from voting their conscience, from even going to vote. Uh, I just, we have to remind ourselves that the person sitting in the Oval Office is the same person who denied that the 2020 elections were fair. Who has convinced many Americans that they were not fair, that the election in 2020 was stolen from him without any basis in fact, when even his own attorney general said he was wrong, and then had some part to play, and we can debate how much of a part to play, but he had some part to play in encouraging an attack on the Capitol on January 6th, 2021. This is the same person who is now president of the United States. So I worry about this country, Katie. I worry because I have friends and relatives who are Trump supporters. I go out of my way to talk to Trump supporters. Whenever I'm invited by a university that has a conservative group that wants me to come and speak, I come and speak to them. But I've never seen this degree of suspicion and anger and distrust and polarization in this country.
I hear you, and I guess the question is, I mean, there's a litany of things, and then of course he pardoned everyone who from January 6th. I mean, we could spend a lot of time, Bob, talking about all the things this president has done and all the things this administration continues to want to do. But I guess when you talk to these people, when you talk to the Trump supporters, and you know, it's there's no really persuading so many of them that this man is really dangerous. And I'm
Well,
curious, I mean, why?
well, here's what I get from my many conversations with Trump supporters. They tell me that they feel that they've been on the losing end of a system for years and years, that the system has been rigged against them by, and they say it's coastal elites. They think that they are looked down upon by people of college educations. They feel that the people in New York and Washington and Los Angeles and San Francisco really don't represent their values. They feel that for the first time they're being heard. Now, when I say back to them, but what has he actually done for you? He's passed a huge tax cut for mostly benefits the wealthy. What has he done for you? And they say to me, well, he's acting tough, and he's acting tough on behalf of my values. Uh, I don't know how to respond to that. I think it'll take years for America to come back together. I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm sure you're going to do whatever you can. And many people who are watching us will do whatever they can, because mending what has happened, overcoming this rift, making sure that our conceptions of justice and of democracy and of the rule of law are dominant and are agreed to, it seems to me is more important than anything else we can possibly do.
But it's also not it does seem to me totally incongruous with what the Trump administration is trying to do, because this attitude of divide and conquer is straight out of the authoritarians' playbook, as you said earlier. So they're sowing division. They do not want unity. They want us to, he keeps talking about, as you mentioned, the enemy within. They are trying to, hurt us. I hate my opponents. I mean, it is all the language of division. So it's very hard to kind of fight that and to reach across the aisle when his followers are being encouraged to hate the other side. And I think the response from the other side is to hate them right back.
And it can't be. I mean, in terms of the religious traditions that we hold dear, in terms of our own patriotism and views of citizenship, we've got to avoid hating each other. We can't make each other the enemy. And the other point here, Katie, is that, and I can't help thinking this, that you've got a new billionaire class in America who really doesn't mind, and maybe even encourages with a nod and a wink, Americans uh, dividing and hating each other, so that we don't look up and see where all the wealth and power really have gone in this country.
Well, Bob, you didn't make me feel any better. But
Well, look, I heard somebody a couple of days ago say to me, when said to them, "How are you doing?" They said, "On the macro, terrible. On the micro, I'm doing well." And I think that many people feel that way. I mean, if you look out at the big picture, it just looks worse and worse. If you look at just your own circumstance, your own family, um, your own community, people are struggling, but they they're doing fairly well.
A lot of my friends are, I hear that too, macro and micro. But for a lot of people I know, the macro is really affecting the micro. And it's creating huge anxiety and upset and a feeling of hopelessness, powerlessness, feeling overwhelmed, really, truly, really, really worried about the future of our country.
And stressed and depressed. Here's what I tell people who tell me that I'm feeling stressed and depressed. I say to them honestly that the best antidote to feeling stressed and depressed by everything that's going on is activism. Activism. I don't care whether it's very tiny steps you're taking, writing to your member of Congress or calling your members of Congress, or it's demonstrating, or it is boycotting companies that you think are doing too much, surrendering to this administration, or doing bigger things. Whatever you're doing, if it's activist, if you are actually doing things that honor the values that we hold dear, people feel better. That overcomes their sense of powerlessness and peril and this kind of despair. Um, Activism is the best antidote for despair.
Well, that's a good place to end. I hope that we can do this again soon. I've always liked you so much and admired you so much, Bob. So maybe we can have a conversation like this on a regular basis.
I would love that, Katie. Thank you. And the feeling is mutual.
Well, it's great to see you. And now I'm going to talk to Charlie Sykes about the shit show in Quantico. Hey, that rhymes, everybody.
Show in Quantico.
Okay.
Thank you, Katie.
All right. Talk to you soon, Bob.
You
Okay.
stay well.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Okay. Bye. Okay, you guys. Now I'm going to get Charlie on the horn. Bear with me. Um, and by the way, if please subscribe and think about being a paid subscriber because these things don't just happen with me alone. I have a whole team that's very helpful and really full of amazing journalists. And there, look, Charlie, your hair's gotten grayer, whiter.
Hasn't all of America's hair gotten grayer, and whiter?
Well,
Mm.
not mine, but I get a little help from my hairdresser, Charlie. So listen, I had to laugh when I read your newsletter this morning because it was really funny. By the way, everyone should subscribe to Charlie's Substack, and his newsletter is called To the Contrary. It's excellent. He's also the author of several books, including How the Right Lost Its Mind. So, Charlie, I have to talk to you. I was just talking to Bob Reich, and I was saying, I got to go. I got to talk about the shit show in Quantico. I don't know if you heard that with Charlie
I did.
Sykes. And tell me about this gathering in Quantico, which honestly, everything is starting to feel like a bad movie. Um, this gathering of the top military leaders all around the world summoned to Quantico, Virginia for really, I think, not a pep talk, but more of a lecture by Pete Hegseth. What did you make of it?
Well, it was a rant from Pete Exit. Anyway, good to talk with you. I'll try to make you feel better. I actually wore my Rebel Scum pin just for this occasion because I do
What
feel that
is your Rebel Scum pin?
well, it's Star Wars thing. And remember when they referred to the Rebel Scum, and then Donald Trump began referring to his critics as scum back in the before times. You know, the hard part about dealing with the events of these days, it is feels like it's a bad movie, and it feels like it's speeding up, doesn't it? I mean, it feels, we've had these very, very intense news cycles, but now it feels like shock therapy. And so, yet yesterday, it, and this is why it's hard to get your head around it. So yesterday is this weird mixture. We ought to be used to it by now, right? Of absurdity and menace. I mean, should you be laughing at it, or should you be horrified by what you just saw there? So, I mean, Pete Hegseth, Secretary Kegstan, lecturing all of these generals, and think who we're talking about. We're talking about the 800 most senior leaders of the world's most lethal military force. And he makes them come and listen to some sort of a knockoff MAGA rally speech where he's talking about where he's talking about wokeness and hair color and the big biceps, as if somehow, the next war is going to be won by, bulging biceps, not by drones or something like that. It was so absurd. It was so insulting. And there was no discussion of honor. There was no discussion of character. There's no discussion of actual foreign policy. It was just Pete Hegseth strutting across the stage, trying to be what, a poor man's Patton. And what I was wondering was, what are these men and women? What's going on in their mind? I mean, and they were
In
silent,
fact,
right? Stone
yeah,
faced.
can I read
Yeah,
what you
please.
wrote in your
Sure,
newsletter?
sure.
Because
Yeah,
it did make me laugh. You said, or you wrote, I keep trying to imagine what was going on inside the minds of those generals as they listened to this endless stream of big dick cosplaying from the Secretary of Defense and Secretary of War, Charlie, and the
yeah,
President
no.
of the United States. Okay, here's what Charlie said they were thinking to themselves. I had to fly 8,000 miles for this shit. I might have to go to war with these lunatic chodes. FFS. What's FS? What's
For fuck's sake.
Oh, for fuck's sake, sorry. What am I going to tell my troops? Don't roll eyes. These guys
Mhm.
are actually rooting for war crimes and they want me to invade American cities. For fuck's sakes. Sorry, my language, everyone. This is what Charlie wrote, not me. Don't roll eyes.
Generals and stuff.
What's my pension status? And finally, WTAF, is this almost over? Can I go now? It really, I mean, and then what did you think about Trump kind of basically telling apolitical military leaders that they should be applauding him?
Well, okay, so that the, after this clown show of Pete Hegseth, Trump comes on, and as I said, Trump was worse. Not because I mean he was actually kind of low energy, and he seemed thrown off by the fact that they weren't applauding him. And I think this was very important. I hope we talk about this. The fact that these generals sat there in stony silence. I mean, there was no cheering, there was no foot stamping, there was no. They did what generals are supposed to do, and I think Trump was a little bit uncomfortable with that. But
And
he
admirals,
was
by the way. Let's not leave the Navy out of this,
yes,
Charlie.
exactly. The 800 most senior generals and admirals in the world who were forced to come and listen to this. He could have done an email. He could have sent a YouTube video. He could have done a live stream like that. But this was all about power. So Trump comes on, and it's the usual Trumpian. I mean, we've been doing this now for 10 years, right, Katie? You know, the deranged, demented dribble, and there was all of that wandering, give me the Nobel, lies and attacks on various people. But the heart of that speech, and this again, we have to balance out the absurdity with, okay, this is happening, folks. The commander in chief is standing in front of the generals of the world's most lethal military, telling them that he intends to order them to conscript them for a war not against China or Russia, but against American cities. He kept coming back to this, the war within, and that they were going to play a central role in going after domestic enemies. Now, one of the points I made in the newsletter is this is not just Trump having a bad day. This is not just his prefrontal cortex, melting into rancid guacamole. He has been saying this for years now. And I went back to 2023 and he actually taped a YouTube video where he basically said, we shouldn't have to worry about Putin. We have to worry about these far leftists in the United States, this domestic invasion. Who is the real enemy? It's us. It's other Americans. And so here, so he's been talking about it for years and now he's doing it.
I feel like it's
And
really been amped up, though, Charlie,
yes,
this rhetoric in the last month
yes.
or so.
Well, he's also putting soldiers behind it. I mean, the rhetoric's always been there. I think we got numbed to it. I think we stopped paying attention to it. And now we're starting to see these soldiers on the streets. We're seeing that he intends to do it. I think a lot of people have been in denial about this, a failure of imagination. Like, there's no way he's going to do that. I mean, how many times have you had conversations where people say, well, you know what? There's all of these norms and guardrails in the Department of Justice. So, well, there's all these norms and guardrails. And what do we have over the last 9 months? Donald Trump basically marching through the institutions one at a time. And now he's come for the military. He is the commander in chief, and he has troops on the streets in DC and LA and Portland. He's going to send them to Chicago, and well, he keeps coming up with the list: San Francisco, New Orleans, and he's going to do it. And every day we see the pictures of the the ICE squad. I mean, I'm sorry, the ICE that has become this personalized masked brute squad for the president. So yeah, the rhetoric is amping up, but so is the action. It's not just words. He is doing now what he has been saying and thinking about for years. In the first administration, there were grown-ups who restrained him. There were generals who said, "Mr. President, no, you can't do this." And his mission right now is to create a military that will be loyal to him, that will follow his orders. And so far, that hasn't happened yet.
Well, let's talk about sort of the end game, because I don't want to be accused of a failure of imagination, Charlie. So he wants to use the military to fight, the radical left or crime infested cities, mostly
Yeah,
blue cities, right?
yeah.
And so, I talked to Governor Pritzker not too long ago, and he believes that he wants to get Americans accustomed to seeing the military in the streets of the city. So when he refuses to step down, it'll be basically, he'll have the military supporting him in a coup, essentially. I mean, I'm kind of extrapolating from my conversation with Governor Pritzker, but what's the end game here?
Well, we don't know that. I mean, let's break this into two parts,
And by
okay?
the way, I
Um,
said the coup, Governor
yeah,
Pritzker
right.
didn't.
So I want to break this down. We'll get to where it's going. I think he's right when he says that he's trying to normalize all this, and the fact is that Donald Trump has normalized a lot of things. I mean, every single day. I mean, you've been in news a very long time, and every single day we will see a story, a scandal, an outrage that at one time would have just consumed the news cycle for weeks, and now it's forgotten about by Wednesday.
Right.
So a lot has been normalized, a lot has been done, and so yes, he wants to make this routine. He wants to make this, something that people just assume. Well, of course we have troops in the street. We ought to just mention before we go too far into this. There's a specific law on the books, posse comitatus,
Right.
which let me tell you, which makes it illegal under federal law to use the military to enforce law. Every admiral and general in that room knows about posse comitatus. Donald Trump doesn't give a shit about it. He doesn't care. He wants to make that a dead letter, and he's testing and he's probing and he's seeing how far he can push this. What is the tolerance level? And the question I think he's asking himself is not, you know, am I winning hearts and minds? It is, am I making the people that I want to fearful? Am I intimidating my opposition? And is the base still with me? As long as the Republican base is with him, he's going to keep doing this sort of thing. But look, I mean, in terms of like imagination, it's hard to get more dystopian than the president of the United States giving a speech where he refers to other Americans as the enemy, as the invaders, and then telling the military, the U.S. military, that has tanks and guns. We've just been told by Pete Hegseth that their only job, remember what he said? Not about honor and saving the world for democracy. It was killing people and breaking things. Elon says, I am liberating you today. You are back to your job, which is killing people and breaking things. President comes on stage and says, okay, I'm going to send you into these American cities to confront Americans to do what? So for all the people who said that people like me or you or others suffered from Trump derangement syndrome when we worried and we warned them about what Trump 2.0 would be like, hey, folks, look around. It's happening. Now, does that mean that we're going to get to a point where in 2028 he uses the military to keep power? My instincts tell me calm down. My imagination is starting to tell me, look, this is the guy who already tried to overturn an election. Donald Trump is the first American president ever to stop the peaceful transfer of power. Did we forget that? So what do we think he's going to do? And did you see what he did in that bullshit meeting between Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer? Did you see that?
Did I see
He did.
the AI video?
No, the hats. Okay. Now, I'm going to write about this tomorrow. I'm going to apologize because I actually thought that was AI. I thought that was fake. Okay. There's a picture. He brings the Democratic leaders in and he puts these red Trump 2028 hats on the desk in the Oval Office to sort of taunt them. Now, again, just for you nerds out there, the U.S. Constitution forbids that. It would be unconstitutional. So he's taunting the Democrats at this high stakes negotiation with the fact, you know what? I might do this. You know, what do you think I'm capable of? I might go for a third term. And what are you going to do to stop me? And so he's basically, again, testing the water, testing the water, testing the water. And let me ask you this, Katie. What Republican in office right now would stand up against him if he said, you know what? I'm doing such a great job. America needs me. I need to stick around. I'm running in 2028. Name the Republicans who would resist him.
Nobody
That's the
who's
scary.
Nobody who's currently in office, although I don't know, I can't lose so much faith in every person. I'd like to believe that there's some profile and courage out there. But what about if the midterms? First of all, do you think that the midterms will change? I just talked to, who was I talking to? Uh, I can't remember if was it Bob Reich just a minute ago? I
Mm-hmm.
also talked to David Frum this morning,
Hmm.
who said that the Democrats are going to take the House and the Senate. And I was asking him about redistricting. I mean, if does that change Trump's ambitions if that happens, Charlie?
Yeah, no, it will. That will be absolutely huge. There's no question about it. I heard your conversation with Robert Reich, and I think you actually asked a lot of these right skeptical questions about that because I also am concerned that they are attempting to rig the election. And by the way, once again, every charge they make is a projection, is a confession. They've been talking about rigged elections for years and years and years, the big lie. Well, what do they intend to do? They intend to rig the election. So yeah, I actually worry about that more than they do. I think that there's a very real possibility. I think the Senate is tough, but if in fact, well, let's do the other scenario. Let's just imagine that we're in this delusional bubble, which, by the way, a lot of us were before the 2024 election. And my advice to everybody is really, try not to get caught in that bubble where everybody tell you, that everything's working and you're winning and everything. Imagine if Republicans retain control of the Senate and retain control of the House of Representatives. Trump retains absolute control of the federal government. There will be no restraint on that at all. That will be the Congress that will be counting the votes, I think, in the 2028 election and will determine what the congressional certification looks like. And again, who knows how that's going to play out. They will confirm anyone he puts on the U.S. Supreme Court. And as part of our failure of imagination thing, think of the worst possible person you can imagine on the U.S. Supreme Court. And probably it's going to be worse than that. If I would have told you a year ago he was going to try to put Matt Gaetz in as Attorney General, you would have laughed at it. If I would have said Pete Hegseth or Tulsi Gabbard, if I would have said Robert F. Kennedy Jr., if you would have looked at some of these people he's putting in now. So, and also with a rubber stamp Congress, there's nothing that stands between him and, everything in that Project 2025 agenda. So that is crucial. On the other hand, he's blocked. We still do have an Article 1 Congress. The Constitution gives tremendous power to Congress. You not only would have the ability to impeach, which wouldn't go anywhere, but to investigate. Finally, some accountability, some ability to stop the worst kinds of appointments that he's making. So That everything we're discussing right now has been because the opposition lacks the ability and the votes to stop him. He is unstoppable right now, or at least that's what he'd like us to think. He loses in the midterm, that changes rather dramatically.
That hypothetical scenario just gave me the worst stomach ache possible, Charlie. I mean, looking at it, you're a political strategist, and I know the midterms are a ways away, right? Uh, about a year away, and a lot can happen between now and then. But
Yeah.
if you were a betting man, you have to think that the Democrats are going to do well in the midterms, don't you?
Yeah, you do, but we shouldn't get cocky about all of this.
I'm
I mean,
not
I
cocky.
will,
I'm just saying if
no, I mean, I'm
history
not
is
that
any
you are.
guide,
Well, history is fickle on all of this. You might remember that in 20, I think it was 2002 during the midterms, the Republicans act when you had a Republican in the White House, they bucked that historic trend. You know, it's like investing on stocks based on what happened 20 years ago. So yes, I agree, and I heard Robert Reich going through the economics and a lot of the things that are going on. I mean, I'm watching some of these elections. I'm obviously in Wisconsin. Um, the intensity of the Democratic turnout is really impressive, and I think that this is one of the things that forget what the overall number is, who turns out to vote, who has more motivation. No question about it right now. It is the Democrats. But on the other hand, I have to say I wish the Democrats were better at politics. I really, really wish they were better at politics. And there's a lot of denialism going on within the Democratic Party about some of their problems. I will say that get back to me after this November when we see what happens in crucial special elections in Virginia and in New Jersey. The Democrats should win the governorship of both those states. They have very good candidates, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey. They ought
Mikey
to win.
Sherrill is making a lot of mistakes, so it seems to me, Charlie.
Well, okay. I think this is where you go. If she cannot win as a Democrat in this political environment in New Jersey, that sends up some warning signs. I actually also think that political parties are always better when they're running a little bit scared. But again, let's talk about that. If Democrats cannot win in New Jersey, I think that's a warning sign. But it's a warning sign of things that they can adjust. I mean, I know the Democrats are all saying that they need to adjust their message to get the working class back. What I'm not seeing is a real effort to actually do anything that will do that. Now, on the other hand, look, some of these issues, and Robert Reich went through them, the healthcare issue is huge. The economy is huge. Affordability is a very toxic issue for Donald Trump. Uh, I am amazed that Donald Trump has squandered his advantage on immigration. I think every time you see a masked ICE thug throw a grandma to the ground, he loses points. So Donald Trump is not expanding his tent. He's alienating the Hispanic voters who, gave him a shot in 2024. I think he's hemorrhaging support among young voters who were somewhat Trump curious. So there's a lot of opportunity here. But again, I guess I wish the Democrats had better leadership and were better at politics.
I mean, part of the problem is that D in Democrats also stands for diverse. I mean, they're much more. There's a much bigger variety, I think, don't you, Charlie, of people who call themselves Democrats across the spectrum. And I always feel like the Republicans have these three kind of simple talking points, and they all kind of in lockstep repeat them again and again and again. And I wish the Democrats would do that too, kind of have like Fox News used to have with Roger Ailes. I don't know if they still do, but this is what I want you to talk about today. And this is what I want you to tell viewers over and over and over and over again. And I feel like the Democrats, there's no kind of strong organization at the top saying, we all have to be saying this in a fragmented environment. We all have to be echoing these same talking points and
Well,
these same
so
messages.
I agree with you, and I think that's necessary, but I think it's not sufficient to do it. I mean, at some point, Democrats really have to confront, how they got into this position. This sense that they do look down on voters, that they are dominated by cultural elites that are out of touch with a lot of voters. I I hear a lot of discussions. I mean, let me tell you, my litmus test is okay. I'm imagining, whatever the issue is. If I walked into a George Webb restaurant in Hubertus and I told you this particular story or made this particular case, would it interest anybody or change anyone's mind? And that happens only rarely. There are some issues that will. There are some issues that I think that sometimes liberal elites talk to one another and they speak each other's language and their own jargon, and they are afraid to veer from certain accepted ideas. And at some point, I do think that there's going to have to be some sort of a break, and maybe it's going to be a radical break. Maybe it's going to be a radical embrace of a kind of populism that the Republicans had stolen from them. I heard Robert just making the point about the oligarchy we have in this country. It does strike me that, and I am a political conservative, but the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few of these billionaire chodes is alarming, and the amount of power that we have, and the amount of grift. I mean, we live in, not just a gilded age, but a gilded age of grift. And the average person who looks at this has to think, these are not for me. These people are not on my side. The American dream, and Bill Clinton understood this. The American dream is you work hard, you play by the rules, and you get ahead. And so the question is, which party will reward you for working hard and playing by the rules and getting ahead? And I think Democrats lost that. Republicans now are in this hubristic overreach, wallowing in their power and their wealth and everything. And I think there's a real opportunity there for someone to stand up and say, you want a country run for the Elon Musks of the world or the Peter Thiels of the world, or how about, people like you who are just trying to, you know, get through to the next paycheck.
It's been interesting for me, Charlie, and then I'll let you go. And my friend Kevin Barron's going to tell me what people at the Pentagon are saying about this
Oh, I
Quantico
heard that.
thing.
Hmm.
But, um, shoot, now I forgot what I was going to ask you. Um, shoot.
Well, I could
Uh,
throw in another random opinion. I mean,
wait, you were talking
what
about
Democrats
this
have to
overreach.
say.
What I was going to say.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm finding it interesting to see these working class folks kind of pop up in all these congressional races,
Yes.
who have
Very
backgrounds
good.
as farmers or plumbers and working class families who are kind of saying, hey, I'm sick of not being represented in Congress. Are you noticing that trend?
Yes, and here's a really a point that I really want to make is that Democrats do have this diversity, and they have some really good candidates out there on the bench. They have candidates who are winning in areas and in districts and in states where Trump won. These should be the superstars of the party right now,
Well,
not the
Andy
people who are
Bashir
the
is one of I interviewed Andy Bashir, and
perfect example.
he I guess Trump he got 68% of the vote in a ruby red state of Kentucky. But I don't know, I think he's seems like a great guy. I don't think he's sort of this super charismatic guy. He's
No,
like an incredibly decent man, it seems to me. I don't know him, you guys, but he just comes across that way. And by all accounts, he is. But he's not this carnival barker. He's not necessarily entertaining. He's not this kind of, this that could get a following just from the sheer cult of his personality. You know what I mean?
so can I anger your viewers with this?
Yeah, go ahead.
We ought to be talking a lot more about him. We ought to be talking a lot more about people like Alyssa Slotkin, who won in Michigan when Trump was winning, Abigail Spanberger, who I think is going to be elected of governor of Virginia. And these are the future of the party. These are the majority makers. These are the people who will determine who controls Congress in the future because they can win in those districts. And yet there's this tendency, and it's on places like MSNBC too, to make the people who are the more celebrity types of progressives, you know, into these superstars. I mean, everybody knows AOC's name. Everybody knows Jasmine Crocker's name. Well, these are people who win in districts that are like 70, 80% Democratic. These are not the swing districts. And so I wish there was as much attention by the Democrats on their own rising centrist working class superstars as on the people who could not win an election in any swing district anywhere in the country.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. But just so you know, I'm interviewing Abigail Spanberger. I interviewed Andy. What is wrong with me,
Mhm.
you guys? Thank you.
No, you're part
and
of the
I'm
solution.
I'm
This will be
trying
the
to give those people some, some airtime and some light. I have to ask you one thing that I know I really do need to leave you alone, Charlie. But someone said that Pete Hegseth in this sort of preening, marching around in Quantico, that he's trying to position himself as the candidate in 2028, and JD Vance knows it. What have you heard
I read
rumblings
that.
about that?
Probably only what you saw, purely speculative. Look, I mean, Pete Hegseth has all kinds of delusions of grandeur. I think you see that pretty clearly, but that's not going to happen. It's not
Well,
going to be Hegseth.
yeah, I thought it was interesting. I thought, oh, the plot thickens because, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with JD Vance and other rising stars in the Republican Party. You know, uh, I don't know. I thought you might know some of that palace intrigue and some of the tea you
Dallas
could
intrigue
share with
is
us.
Donald Trump 2028. He's putting the hats out. I'm just saying, you know, he's just testing the water, testing it, testing, testing, testing.
Well,
You know, so
Charlie,
JD
great.
Vance didn't seem very upset about that, did he?
Yeah, why do you say that and what are you suggesting?
I'm just suggesting that at this point, there's all the palace intrigue, but ultimately it's going to come down to one guy making a decision. He's going to pick who his successor is, and there's going to be no elaborate process here. There's going to be no palace intrigue. It's going to be Donald Trump sitting on the golden toilet saying it's either me or it's who I say it's going to be. And it's not going to be Pete Hegseth.
I wish you hadn't left me with that image, but you have. Charlie, thank thanks, Charlie. Great to see you. All right,
All right,
stand
thanks,
by,
Adrian.
everyone, because we're going to just have a quick conversation with my friend Kevin Barron, who is uh, my friend from the Pentagon. And he's just going to tell us what people at the Pentagon are saying about this whole military rally, so to speak, that was, hold on a second, I don't know. I'm at my daughter's house in Los Angeles, and I'm trying to, I think the Wi-Fi isn't so great here, or something's happening. Kevin Barron, here you are, Kevin, Defense Baron. Anyway, I hope you guys are enjoying this conversation. And please subscribe to our Substack and consider being a paid subscriber. I always feel like I'm working for QVC when I say that, but good journalism isn't done for free, as my friend Kevin Barron knows. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Katie, how are you?
I'm good. It's great to see you, Kevin. Thank you for doing this. And I'm sorry that we're a little late to getting to you. Charlie Sykes is so funny. Do you read Charlie?
Sometimes, yeah, he's funny. I was watching,
Oh, good. Well, listen, I just
throwing
wanted
heaters,
to ask, huh?
throwing heaters.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, how you felt about this thing. You've covered the Pentagon for a long time. You've got great sources and contacts in the military. What I really wanted to talk to you is I wanted to hear from you. People in the military can't speak publicly, right? They don't want to get fired or lose their jobs. And I'm curious what the reaction was to this thing in Quantico with Pete Hegseth, as Charlie said, kind of ranting, and then Donald Trump basically, saying you're here to fight your fellow Americans, in essence, right?
Yeah, the enemy within. I mean, I think uh, I think the reaction is largely similar to everyone that we think is our reaction, right? It was just, it's an astounding moment. It was an unnecessary moment. And it turned into a lot of, there's a lot of things to worry about in there. I'm sure there are plenty of generals in that room who might agree with Hegseth and Trump, but there are probably a larger number of generals who disagree with a whole lot of the things that are in there. And I've talked to a couple of reporters who are still on the beat, and I've talked to a couple, people in and out of the Pentagon too, about what they heard, and it's kind of a mix. I think of you know disappointment that these kind of pretty extreme social policies are coming back. Um, the lack of surprise, like we're not surprised that Hegseth and Trump said what they said. These are policies that they promised were coming down the pike. And then in the military world, a little bit more, a little bit more focus on actual military changes, not different than beards and things. And one source of mine, a former high ranking, said it was the line that Hegseth kind of slipped in there that they're also going to they are going to change the rules of engagement. That's a real substantive, worrying, and different thing for how the U.S. military executes combat and battle and war. That's different than everything else this person said is culture war stuff we've heard before. Beards, fitness tests, women, DEI. We've heard this before. A lot of it, frankly, predates Trump and Hegseth by decades. There's a long history of conservatives who wanted to roll back a lot of these policies, and now they finally have a chance.
Yeah. So talk to me about the rules of engagement, potential policy changes. Did he elaborate on that?
No.
And what are they afraid that, what do they fear that means?
So the backstory, I mean, the short version of this is if you remember the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, anytime soldiers got in trouble for doing something, wrong or illegal, like, I don't know, shooting women or children or brown people or civilians or bombing a wedding instead of the wrong place, anything that would literally could be interpreted as a war crime. This kind of thing freaked out a lot of Americans especially on the right, who took the stance of, hey, when we send our boys into battle or women into battle, fog of war. Like, we shouldn't prosecute them when these things happen. Very, very protectionist kind of way to do it. But it goes way farther back to like the Geneva Conventions and the ICC, and how Trump is tearing down rules left and right. Well, those as well. The idea that that there are Americans, and especially military commanders and the conservative side, who think we should never let any foreign person, body, nation, voting, government, anybody have any sort of say in and how we govern or prosecute Americans, how they conduct war. So that's why they oppose like the ICC or joining UN peacekeeping missions, because they think we shouldn't let Americans be under the command of a foreign general, even though technically they're not. That's not how it works. Nuance doesn't matter. We don't want to be a part of any of these things,
And
including
that don't want to be part of the Geneva Conventions?
right, or landmine treaties, the law of the seas. These are, the law of the seas is a perfect example. For many, many years, admirals have asked to be a part of this. The Navy has wanted to join onto this treaty, but the conservative wing of the United States has always said, no, we don't want to. You don't want to put our guys in any position where they might up in court, and their fates be decided upon by foreign people, foreign governments, nations, voters, whatever it might be. That's like the big picture backstory that got really hyper focused during the war years, when it came to like, Abu Ghraib and, just desecrating Korans, all sorts of little incidents, all the way to, people who were trying to murder. Some people who had their convictions overturned, or Trump was, who became like favored sons in cases of Trump, who said they were going to come to the rescue of special operators and others who were prosecuted for wrongdoings. There's something they became heroes to side with politically on the right. All of that is
Hmm.
behind one little phrase of Hegseth yesterday sneaking in between beards and push-ups. By the way, we're going to change the rules of engagement.
So so they're nervous about that.
Of course, it in the same. It's all in the same vein of a retired major, so the civilian Pete Hegseth, who's already you know widely disliked by a huge chunk of the military, officer corps and veterans corps. Um, Preaching to the generals in the room what they need to know about fitness and being in shape, and what it makes to be a real soldier. Like I think David Ignatius had a good column this morning, basically saying we don't need a fit military he's mentioning. We need a smart military. We need a military where everybody's an expert on AI and drones, not pull-ups. In reality, you need both. But it was that kind of notion of why are we here? Why are we focusing on this? Um, Rules of engagement signal to very young soldiers. Remember, trigger pullers are like 18, 19, 23, 25. They're not 60-year-old generals. It's signaling to them why this matters. It lets America take the high ground that it's supposed to have, if you believe that Americans fight wars the right way, the honorable way, per the rules of engagement, per the laws of war that go back decades in the profession of arms, that goes back centuries. We don't, do things, we don't attack civilians. And when we do, we investigate them, we be transparent about them, we be public about them. In the same breath and into today, Trump said he's just quashing the inspector general. The Trump administration said, I see the government executives reporting today, they shut down 15 inspector general sites of agencies. This is all to prevent transparency. This is to prevent, the
Right.
from investigating when things go wrong under their watch.
That was a long time ago that they were getting rid of all the IG's office. So did they get rid of more?
Today, they're reporting 15 different agency websites have been shut down, so you can't access any of the IG reports. And some of the thinking is that, well, guess who is is the subject of an IG investigation right now for his role in Signalgate? Pete Hegseth and other people across the administration. But it's a whitewashing. It's an anti-wokeism whitewashing, saying IGs were used as political tools, which that's kind of the exact opposite of the purpose of an IG and what those inspectors general do. But yeah, it was a hell of a day yesterday.
I was looking up Mark Milley. I hope is my connection okay? Can you see me and hear me okay?
I can. Is mine
Uh,
bad?
yeah, I think yours is okay. I just looked up Mark Milley's farewell address, where
Huh.
he said, "We don't
Yep.
take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or dictator, and we don't take an oath from a wannabe dictator. We don't take an oath to an individual. We take an oath to the Constitution, and we take an oath to the idea that is America, and we're willing to die to protect it. Every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Guardian, and Coast Guardsman, each of us commits our very life to protect and defend that document, regardless of personal price, and we are not easily intimidated." That was such an incredible speech by General Milley, and somebody asked on social, can anybody in the military speak out against Donald Trump, or is it just a fool's errand to even try to do that?
Well, yeah, no, you can, and if you do, you'll be summarily fired pretty quickly. And frankly, you probably should be, unless the rule is, if it's an unlawful order, then yes, you can speak up. If it's not, you're supposed to salute smartly and get the job done and carry out the policy. You may hate everything that Hegseth and Trump said yesterday, but the fact is, these are the democratically elected leaders, and the Senate approved Hegseth. The Senate Armed Services Committee put him through. I wish a lot more people would put the spotlight on Senator Wicker and that committee for the people that they put in power and left in power, and how quiet they're being through all this, right? Because I'm sure plenty of people on the GOP SASC, feel as badly as a lot of us do, but others don't. So look, yeah, when you're in the military, you can't speak up. I'll give you an example. When I was a young reporter at the Pentagon for Stars and Stripes, already retiring 3-star general wrote an op-ed and sent it to Stars and Stripes, which doesn't even run op-eds. It was like an analysis piece, basically saying he was opposed to repealing the Donuts Don't Tell policy. He was a Southern Christian leader. He did not want gays in the military, and he made it known so. He did not get to serve out the end of his generalship. He was done. And I remember, I think it was Admiral Mullen who was at the podium back then saying, you carry out the policy, or you walk with your feet. Now, if a general's in that room who think like, I don't want to do this anymore, you don't get to like quit and go home the next day. You're still in the military. You have service to complete, but you may be pulled from that job and given desk duty, or it gets kind of complicated, and I don't even know all the rules of it, but you can't just walk out. So, and frankly, there's a lot of people that are hopeful that the military just keeps its mouth shut and keeps its head down and gets through this, because speaking up, frankly, could make things a whole lot worse. not just for things now, but for the next president who could be a Democrat when there are other Republicans in the service who, or privately may disagree with Democratic policies, right? There are a lot of people that think that really want the military to do their best to shut up and sit it out and just serve. That's why I think we haven't heard from all of America's retired generals. Milley's not going to talk for lots of reasons. He's talking to some. He'll peep up every now and then. But remember, also, President Trump came into office and very quickly removed General Milley's security detail. That guy's after the president had called for General Milley to be executed. Donald Trump said that. So there are others who are facing that same kind of scrutiny. Some people out there think they can speak up, and they will. This goes back for a while. I mean, the last cycle, you had General Mattis telling people in public, "I don't think generals should speak and go into politics," and he was saying it frankly as he was selling his book in Washington, making the rounds at like David Bradley's house. I was there and wrote about it. And then you have people like John Allen, another former Afghanistan war commander, who was on stage at the Democratic convention, giving his speeches in favor of Hillary Clinton. And the military generals, they went at it about, which was the right way to act when you're a retired general. And, the answer is it depends on the person. Right. So it's very difficult. I think a lot of people, and I would love to see some generals and admirals come out a little bit more and start to speak about not just Hegseth's, beard policies, but what we said in the beginning, sending troops into American cities, the signal to the force, the signal to the public and recruiting that's going to happen, the signal to Congress, the signal to corporate America and the defense industry who supports the Pentagon, and to our allies and partners abroad.
What about signals to women, for example, to minorities? I guess, somebody on social said to ask, why would women even want to be in the military right now? How's this going to impact recruitment? And what will happen to women in the military who have, legitimately earned their rank? I mean, it's the military is always known for one of the first places for integration, and they in many ways have been sort of a North Star for the rest of society in terms of how it conducts itself.
Mm.
And now it's just going backwards, and they want to kind of go back to the 1950s. And personally, I think that sucks, Kevin.
I agree, Katie Couric. I think it goes back to the early 1940s for Black service members. Look, the military also it's not trying to be just an example, but try to be a reflection of the society, right? Kirby used to say that a lot. The press secretaries used to like to use that phrase.
I agree,
Meaning,
but I also feel like they were on the forefront of a lot of these issues. Were they not, Kevin?
They were for minorities. Yeah, it depends for women. Yes, for access, but not for all jobs. I mean, the military
Yeah,
opened all of its jobs to women, and so I think it was 2019. Maybe
that's true.
it was
Yeah,
very
that's
recent.
true.
It was like it was Panetta or Ash Carter during their term. Plenty of jobs were, but not all, and that's part of as was said even before that moment. Again, there's a history there where conservatives thought they only wanted men in their service anyway, and the minute that they were going to, especially in combat jobs, and anything that was going to open the door for women, they already set up for the fight, claiming that, those Democrats are going to lower the standards to let women in. Now, give an example. Lowering standards mean, I said this before, one of the examples they would give was if you work inside of a tank, one of the jobs is you have to pick up the big shell, turn your body like this with your upper body, and load it into the gun on the other side. It's heavy. It requires massive upper body strength. Most women probably aren't going to qualify for that job. And frankly, a lot of men aren't either. It's the kind of job where the military said, yeah, there are jobs like that. And if you can't qualify and do the job, then you don't get that job. But we're not going to lower the standards. They did reconsider all the standards and come up with a new one that they thought was good enough for men and women. Conservatives, latched on that, say you've lowered the standards so that women can get in. And now there has to be standards for male. They didn't define male. I mean, I have two brothers. One of my brothers is shorter than me, and one's bigger than me. And guess what? One of them could do pull-ups, and the other one can't. So it's ridiculous in that sense. But it's gonna hurt recruiting for sure. And I know I've known women in the military from 3 stars and 4 stars all the way down to the entry level and civilians too. And I can imagine what they're thinking hearing this, especially women who've already served in combat, women who were trigger pullers and served in the war, or combat pilots like, like the senator, who have been there. But it's important, to explain to your viewers how this great phrase, you remember that in the military where they say, you can't recruit a colonel. You have to recruit at the bottom and work your way up. So the military it's a big pyramid with a whole lot of 18 and 19-year-olds, a few, 6-year-olds at the top, unless you're like a doctor or a jazz musician or some kind. You have to start at the bottom. And every time there's a change in our society where the economy is doing better, when the economy is doing better, poorer Americans don't join the military because they don't need the jobs. They're not willing to go in as easily as before. When the economy is down, that's a good way to get social mobility. It's a good way to get the GI Bill. It's a good way to get a quick job and not have to, work your way through it. That all happens. It gets magnified for minority groups, and I reported on it, and we investigated this at the Boston Globe in the mid 2000s. So literally 20 years ago. We did this where we showed very quickly after 9/11, black recruiting started going down fast. And as soon as George Bush invaded Iraq, it really plummeted because blacks thought this is not our war. This is not why I'm joining the military. It was already unpopular to begin with. Whites, on the other hand, especially whites who live near like Fort Bragg or from military families, they join. Well, why? Because mostly, maybe not mostly, but in large chunk, Black Americans were joining for those social mobility reasons and for the job and income and all the rest. Whites, especially affluent whites, are joining for the patriotism, for the fight, for the revenge of 9/11, for whatever it might be. This stuff goes like this. So what happens right now is if we have less blacks joining, fewer blacks, fewer women, fewer minorities, that means 20 years from now, we have fewer blacks, minorities, women's, gay, trans, anybody who's being, hurt by these policies. There are fewer of them. There will be fewer generals. There will be fewer admirals, fewer colonels, all the way down.
Because fewer people in the pipeline. And I'm not sure how I feel about those mass generalizations about whites equal patriotism and blacks equal jobs, but we can discuss that in another time.
I mean,
Because that
I'll say I'm quoting the military's own numbers and studies of they asked troops like, why did you join and what are the reasons? And yeah, I mean, these are like minorities and majorities. These are like not everybody, of course,
right.
but that's in the
But I
general.
think you're saying for upward mobility reasons are often motivating a lot of minority recruits. And after 9/11 specifically, I think probably.
Well, when soldiers were dying by the hundreds by the week after 2004 and 5 and 6 and Fallujah and Iraq was really blowing up, there was no escaping the idea that if you joined, you weren't going to, there was a much higher chance that you were actually going to get into combat or at least be at a forward operating base somewhere in a danger zone. You weren't going to be in the rear with the gear or on some paper pusher job. Cut to today, by the way, when Hegseth and Trump are all gung ho about um, pull ups and fitness and combat and warrior ethos. I think the stat was something like less than 25% of the soldiers sent downrange actually see combat. But now if you're in Iraq during the Iraq War and anywhere it's dangerous and you get a combat ribbon, yes, of course. But you know what I mean. You're not
Yeah.
a roller door kicker, pilot doing something that's an inherent danger immediately, like in that kind of a job. And so now it's got to be remote. What's the percentage of American soldiers right now who are carrying out, conducting combat type operations? It's the rare thing you hear of, like the bombing of the Iranian sites, Syrian counterterrorism missions that pop up and we get notices about them. It's always dangerous in the military. It's dangerous to train anywhere. Training is dangerous. There are accidents everywhere. Flying is dangerous. Being on nuclear powered submarines or ships is dangerous. But we know that we know what we mean. There are many different jobs in the military.
I think it's interesting about, we should be focused on what you were saying, that the best and the brightest in terms of, because warfare is, it's not hand to hand combat anymore. It's drones and technology and all that, like you were saying. Before we go, because I want to go play with my grandson, I'm here in Los Angeles visiting my daughter and her husband and their baby. But I just have to ask you real quickly, Kevin, because we both covered the Pentagon, this insane thing where they're making reporters sign a pledge that they will not divulge unclassified information. without clearing it first. And if they don't sign the pledge, they could be denied access to the Pentagon. What has the reaction been? Have Pentagon news organizations kind of joined forces to fight this thing? It is so insane.
It is. I mean, look, I was so your readers, your viewers know I covered the Pentagon in the building for more than a decade as a reporter, and then as an editor, and then I ran a newsroom of reporters who cover the Pentagon. Through 6, 7, 8 different secretaries of defense and press secretaries. This is beyond anything. No other administration has had any kind of problem with the press that they wanted to do this. It's really crazy. And I said when this came out how I cannot imagine ever. I would never sign this. It's basically a loyalty pledge to Pete Hegseth's desk that no information gets out to the public without his approval. Um, of course, we would never sign this. Of course, I would never have my newsroom sign this. What I have talked to other reporters and seen this, and I was the vice president of the Pentagon Press Association, our kind of informal club to talk to the press office and iron out differences and things. Um, I think there's a lot of comparisons to what happened when AP got kicked out of the White House briefly earlier this year.
For not
Where,
saying it was the Gulf of America.
yeah. So in that case, like everybody, was on AP's side, but nobody was going to like boycott and not go do their jobs and report on the president. You got to go do your reporting. This is different. Everybody's out. Everybody's out. So yeah, we saw some pretty quick statements from like the communication desks at like CNN, New York Times, Jeff at the Atlantic, and Nancy Youssef wrote a longtime Pentagon reporter who's now at the Atlantic, wrote a very good piece explaining why this is ridiculous. Barbara Starr is out there talking about it, former CNN legend, my mama that I worked with for so many years. But no, there's no like everybody's not getting together in a class action lawsuit to the Supreme Court challenging this. I think people are waiting to see if they really go through with it, and maybe I don't know. Maybe people are waiting to get denied and then file some sort of complaint or suit. But the clock is ticking. I think but by next week we're already on the clock where the Pentagon said they're going to start reissuing Pentagon passes for reporters. They've added a new second badge to go with it, like bright red says, press do not touch or something on it. And the process that they said would happen was, if you get through that clearance and they decide to give you a badge, once you go to pick it up, that's when you sign your life away in this loyalty pledge and get your pass. If you don't want to do it, they say you have 5 days to consult with your counsel, but at the end of the 5 days, you lose your badge, like your full access to the Pentagon. Now, already they destroyed the Pentagon access for reporters. You can only go to your wedge where the briefing room is, the press bullpen is. You can't even go past that except to leave the building and out without an escort, which is just ridiculous. I mean,
That is so crazy because that's where all the stories are when you're walking around the E-ring, right?
Yep. So, people know reporters back in the day, you can walk anywhere in the Pentagon, mostly every hallway, every corridor, but there are certain offices that have,
Right.
locks on them and you can knock or you don't get in. But you can walk right into the reception area in front of the Secretary of Defense's office. You can go anywhere you need to go. And all of the service branches have their own public affairs desk. The Army's public affairs office for
Right.
world is there, Navy, Air Force. So yeah, of course, there's a lot that goes on there. There's a big press corps. There's daily information. We had lots of hypotheticals that nobody knows how it's going to work out. What if, after or in the middle of this process, there's another 9/11, another bombing of Iran, whatever the next thing that's going to happen inevitably is? Usually, reporters who are in the building can just get out of their chairs, walk across the hall. You remember how it works, and go confirm it, and then get right on air or get right into the wire, or file your stories. You're not like across the river in DC and got to make it to the building and get approval. You don't have to wait for somebody to tell you your story is good to go. You just do your job. What if we're in the middle of a briefing and something happens? Am I supposed to go file a story and then wait for Hegseth to say yes? There's no way. There's no way this
I
is.
mean, it's so asinine,
Yeah.
honestly. And I'm just sort of pissed at all these news organizations who are not raising holy hell and saying this is crazy. We are not going to, this is and like doing something now and letting the clock tick. I don't get
And
it.
as a reporter, I understand there are plenty of reporters who are probably just play it straight, write the headline, and let your pen do the talking, and see if this continues or not. But yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be the reporters who do the complaining. It should, their editors can complain, but it should be places like the communications representatives of these major media companies and their lawyers to figure out what to do about it. I mean, I talked to people at Society of Professional Journalism. I talked to
Yeah.
Columbia Journalism Review. So the journalism media community is reporting about it and writing about it, and you can raise a flag. But right now, it's a guidance that's come out, and I don't know where we go from here, because I think we're within a week or two from the entire press corps being locked out of the Pentagon. The canary in the coal mine for me will be, will the right wing organizations that they've let into the building and take over the desks that kicked out NBC, New York Times, CNN, some of those groups, Breitbart, Newsmax, OANN, like Epic Times, someone else, they're all there. If those guys sign, that's all you need to know.
Yeah. Scary. It's really scary. Well, Kevin, thanks for spending some time with me. And thank you to Charlie Sykes and Robert Reich and to everybody who watched. I hope, I don't know, I always feel like this is part show, part therapy session for me, Kevin, because I'm always like, I need to talk to somebody about
What?
this.
You talking
So,
about your mother? I don't know.
no, but thank you. Thank you for being my therapist and for being a source of great information for us as always, Kevin. And get rid of that beard if you want to be Pete Hegseth's friend, right?
Hey, I'll take him. I'll challenge him to push-ups anytime. Whatever.
Okay.
How
Yeah.
about a spelling contest, sir?
Yeah, that would be great. I think maybe that would be more important. Anyway, um, thanks, Kevin, and thanks everyone. And subscribe and think about being a paid subscriber. And Kevin, you have a Substack also.
As of last week, I have a Substack, sure, and we're starting our own little interview show about where global affairs meets global sports and culture. Lots of technologies and social issues like that.
That's right.
There's my plug.
I knew you were putting that together. Well, let us know how we can support you and spread the word. But it's Kevin Barron, and your Substack is, what's your Substack called?
Elevation Live, Kevin Barron. That'll be the new show coming out.
Oh, okay. All right, but it's not happening yet.
We have our first interview lineup next week, and the week after is what we're targeting for the big splash first episode.
Okay, awesome. Well, Kevin, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for watching. I'm going to go play in the backyard.
All right, sign out. Bye.
Okay, talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.